Hello, welcome to MVP TechBytes. Today we have a very special MVP from Dubai, Atallah. Atallah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Taswar, for having me on. First of all, I'm really happy to be part of your video series, which is I can see that you are introducing many MVPs members, which is
Mhm.
they are playing different areas. So before I really dig into my introduction, I'll just jump into my slide, which is introducing myself. So
Mhm.
my name is Mahmoud Atallah. I'm a Microsoft MVP and also I'm Azure Service Delivery Lead. I'm working for Business Global. It's around my overall experience is around 13 years now. That's a bit outdated slide, but I'm also dad. I'm blogger. I used to be speaker somewhere in the events, and I'm hosting a cloud mechanics community that's especially for Azure and computing services. So I used to be managing two communities, which is Cloud Mechanics and Azure Virtual Desktop user community in Arabic or
Mhm.
بالعربي. And
Mhm.
also I used to helping customer to accelerate their cloud journey. My main focus usually in the remote working solution and Azure Virtual Desktop. This is the area that I'm really playing in.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, I used to speak about DevOps, cloud services, service delivery, and nowadays, for sure, it's artificial intelligence.
Sounds good. Like everybody's on the AI bandwagon right now. But like
Yeah,
today, we're going to be talking about AVDs, Actual Virtual Desktops. So that's an exciting thing too. Like I mean, people do need computing to actually do AI, even too, right?
exactly. Yeah. See, I would say that AI is coming everywhere, but
Mhm.
still there are different areas that we can contribute in. As we highlighted, Azure Virtual Desktop is one of the key areas that we are playing in. But also, we still have to be really aware about AI and surrounding technologies.
Exactly. Cool. Let's look at the agenda today.
Great. So our agenda today will be a bit simple. I know that my colleague Mohammed Kobib already introduced the Azure Virtual
Mhm.
Desktop in your last videos that you introduced, Mohammed, and I will not really consume time in introducing the technology. I'll directly move to the Azure Virtual Desktop benefit as well as the use cases, which is day-to-day facing problems and the challenges with customer where we have special use cases and solution for them using Azure Virtual Desktop.
Excellent. Because I mean, that's the important part, right? It's the use cases at the end of the day that customers care about. Great. Thanks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start by the benefits. So Azure Virtual Desktop, I would say it's a solution that where you would require a special requirement for mobility or access from anywhere. When it comes to the access from anywhere, there are multiple options for you in order to access Azure Virtual Desktop or your end solution.
Mhm.
With Azure Virtual Desktop, you would be able to access the legacy application as well as the heavy solutions that it can be consumed remotely from anywhere with mobility and security and scalability and also different flexibility approaches. Because
Mhm.
of Azure Data Center is available in most of the countries around the world, which is around 140 country and different regions. So we are capable to deliver Azure Virtual Desktop with the maximum user experience, where they
Mhm.
utilize Windows 10 or Windows 11, and also they can optimize their services and integration with Office 365 and third-party workload as well. So when it comes to the Azure Virtual Desktop benefit, I would say it's not only about the accessibility, but we have
Mhm.
to think about security. We have to think about controls. I'm getting a lot of customers, which is we will introduce in the use cases that they are looking for security controllers. Some customers are looking for cost-effective solutions. Some customers are looking for flexibility. With the COVID in 2020, you know that a lot of
Mhm.
customers start working from home where we really Azure Virtual Desktop or back days that was called Windows Virtual Desktop became the well-known solution for every company.
Mhm. Great. So speaking of security, I'm going to put on my security hat because I'm a security guy at the end. Like that's my background. So what do you think? Like, how does Virtual Desktop ensure that the customer is secure by this?
Great, great. Actually, I'm having that in my next slide. So
Great.
let's dive into the security controller part. So I want to say here that we are just securing your virtual desktop solution, but
Mhm.
it's all about Microsoft ecosystem. It's an end-to-end security solution using Microsoft ecosystem.
Mhm.
So I would start by identity. In order to access your Azure Virtual Desktop, for sure, you have to have your identity. And for securing your identity here, we will not really lay over on the Azure Virtual Desktop solution, but we will lay over into the Azure Active Directory. Here, the ecosystems come in the picture, where Microsoft Azure Active Directory services will be consumed, like multi-factor authentication, like conditional access,
Mhm.
like if you do have for sure a higher license, which is P2 or P1, you would have additional function of the security on the identity layer. So first of all, I'm securing the identity, which is the user identity that is
Mhm.
required to access the virtual desktop. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is the virtual desktop solution or the endpoint device itself. So I would have another security controller on the virtual machine or the service that is hosting your application behind the scenes, where I can consume the Defender for Cloud to secure
Mhm.
your endpoint or to secure your application. I would go with the next option where networking. Now, with
Mhm.
the benefit of having Azure Virtual Desktop with a new technology, which is we are calling it Reverse Connect, you are not really introducing networking vulnerability. So your service
Okay.
is not accessible by public internet. For sure, Azure Virtual Desktop itself, it's accessible over the public network, but you are not
Yeah.
introducing your VMs behind that Azure Virtual Desktop to the internet. However, you are consuming the reverse connect where your services will communicate with Microsoft behind the scenes. Microsoft will route the traffic to your end user, and the end user will be reverse connected to the service.
Okay.
It's a bit complicated, but what we are saying here that you are not really opening a specific port to the internet, or you are not allowing your services to be directly accessible over the internet. That's another aspect of the security.
Mhm.
The fourth aspect of the security is the infrastructure, where the hardware and the software is secure by Microsoft. It's not secure from your end. You don't maintain your infrastructure security. You don't maintain your compliance requirement. You don't maintain your hardware upgradation and control. It's something that it's controlled by Microsoft, and you are just getting this service out of the box ready for you. So in case
Okay.
of also compliance requirement, you are certified or you have a specific certification which is ready made for you out of the box because of Microsoft is maintaining this for you behind the scenes. On the last aspect is the data. So for sure, you're hosting your services on Azure Virtual Desktop, and part of those services are your data. So their
Mhm.
data can be encrypted, which is you would have a disk encryption on the virtual desktop solution itself. Also, the data at rest on the storage account, or it is encrypted by Key Vault or other services from Microsoft. Also, from the accessibility perspective, you can control the access for the data. So the data can be accessible from a specific network, which is will be at this point will be the Azure Virtual Desktop networking, and
Mhm.
it will be also restricted with a specific, I would say, access control policy on the data layer. So this is end-to-end a security practice where we can involve Microsoft ecosystem to secure your virtual desktop. That's alongside with the threat protection solution and SIM, which can be introduced as later stage.
Cool. So I see that there's five things: identity, which is by Entra, or formerly known as Active Directory, and devices by Defender. Then you got networking, firewalls. You got the compliance certificates, which are provided already, uh, and then the data encryption. Do you know if one could use HSM encryption there, or like is it, or have you ever played around with like having it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Very great question, by the way. So when
yeah,
it comes to the HSM or hold your key, some
mhm,
of the customers they prefer to have their own key, which is at that
yes,
time we will introduce the key vault.
yeah,
And in order to introduce the key vault, yeah, for sure there is behind the scenes a lot of requirement, but key vault will allow the customer to consume their key, and they will consume that key in order to encrypt the data. And that's again thanks to the ecosystem, which is end-to-end solution is provided by Microsoft behind the scenes. Great. So going forward, I'll introduce now Azure Virtual Desktop use cases. And
mhm,
just before I jump into this area, I would say that Why I'm talking about Azure Virtual Desktop use cases. When Microsoft introduced WVD in 2019, it was only for a specific requirement, which was a kind of customer requirement for the heavy workload solution, a specific use case. But
Mhm.
after some time, we start getting different use cases and different customer requirement where we start the packaging Azure Virtual Desktop in different package or product where we can sell it as a partner as well. Myself and my company, we are selling Azure Virtual Desktop as one product with a specific use case or customer requirement. So
Mhm.
that's why today I'm introducing use case as a special video for Azure Virtual Desktop. Okay, so starting by the first use case, we had a lot of customer requirement where they were asking about we would require a maintenance, patching, Windows update, management, end user support, application publishing, service access, service interruption, those kind of end user support, which is requiring I would say extensive support and also to require someone to be physically available with the end user in order to support them and behind the scenes requiring also getting those devices or laptop maintained, updated, patched. It require manpower, which is for sure it's
Mhm.
costly, and also it require a downtime or maintenance time for these services. With Azure Virtual Desktop now you have the full flexibility of having your workload fully used by the end user, but behind the scenes, one of the IT admin is creating a new image. This image
Mhm.
with all the new updates, with all the new patches, also with the application changes and application configuration, publishing all the application requirement, validating the accessibility, validating the functionality, and then introducing it as a golden image, which is he can use it as the base for his virtual desktop. And
Mhm.
at that time, for sure, he will introduce the new changes directly to the end user without having a gap or a huge maintenance window.
Okay, so it's in some ways it's a cost saving for them because they will have to maintain less of them. They just need to maintain a base image, and then it would just automatically deploy it to all the users.
Exactly, exactly, and
Mm.
it's for sure it's saving cost, it's saving the hassle and complexity as well because the end user support, it's a very hassle
Mm.
behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Going forward with the next actual requirement, which is or the use case is security and regulation.
Mm.
Myself, to be honest, I've been dealing with healthcare, especially healthcare and banking sector, where they used to use Citrix behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
before we introduced Azure Virtual Desktop, most of the healthcare and banking sector they used to have Citrix, which is maintaining their services because there is a specific security requirement and security and regulation which is cannot maintain on the end user device. So when the user is consuming the laptop, there is a lot of security controller. It has to be maintained, compliance. It has to be configured. Also, if the user themselves they are traveling abroad, so
Mhm.
maybe as a financial sector or banking sector, you are not allowing your end user to access out of your network. So you can
Mhm.
assume that your user now is traveling abroad. Now, still he need to access the service for some requirement, but you don't allow them to access because you have specific restrictions and security regulation that the user shouldn't access out of the network.
Mhm.
With Azure Virtual Desktop, you're introducing that Azure Virtual Desktop or the VM behind the scenes will be on the same network. It's still in your Azure environment, so it didn't leave your environment, but the user can bring his own device or his end user device or even the business laptop, but still the data doesn't leave the Azure Virtual Desktop environment. And that's introducing the regulation requirement. So for sure, my data will be exactly on the same environment. The user is not eligible to take the data out or to download the data out of this virtual desktop. And also, they won't be able to do specific changes on the device because it's secure and compliant and controlled by that IT admin. However, maybe their end user laptop still they do have the flexibility to install whatever they satisfy their needs. So you
So,
are regulating the environment.
so in some ways, it's almost like if I have the Word document that's on my computer, and there's some secret document on the private network where I'm logging into. I won't able to copy that document onto my computer, sort of thing. So I cannot transfer or even copy my own document onto the virtual desktop too. I think it's both ways, right? That it protects.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, I have one customer that was a bit back. It was around 2020, I think so. They have a software. They are a software engineering company, and
Mhm.
they have their end user back in India, but the company itself is based on Italy.
Okay.
So what they used to do in order to secure their code, they used to build the laptop in Italy, secure it with the key, and secure it with encryption, and for sure restricting some firewall restriction on the VM, and then
Mhm.
encrypting this VM and ship it back to India. After
Okay.
that, the software engineer from India will be able to access the services, will be able to consume it, but still it's involving a lot of cost for shipping back and here and there, and for sure also it's involving a lot of manpower or activities that it has
Mhm.
to be done on the laptop. When we introduced Azure Virtual Desktop to them, we simply created the virtual desktop, and behind the scenes we restricted copy and paste, we restricted internet, we allowed only specific services that they were able to access through the Azure Virtual Desktop, and they were able to code within this environment without taking the code out. So it was satisfy their need, and it was really cost saving for them, which is they are not really providing more laptops for their developers.
Yeah, I guess the only option for them was shipping the person from India to Italy, or else that's going to be more costly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so going forward with another really important use case, which is here, especially in Middle East, I'm getting this requirement multiple times because of the real estate and companies that are developing new real estate requirement, where you
Mhm.
would require CAD designer, you would require heavy worker solutions and systems for contractors and I would say engineering team.
Mhm.
So with this requirement, what the end user used to have, we used to deliver a full GPU system for every single user, and every single user will have his own CAD application, will have his own licensing, will have his own services, which is for sure introducing a duplicate of the licensing cost as well, because the CAD software or the license for that, it's very costly. So you can imagine if you have 20 engineers, you have to get 20 license for the same services and also 20 GPU device.
Mhm.
With Azure Virtual Desktop, we were able to deliver the maximum GPU requirement, which is for sure is available based on the capacity on Azure. And it was really ideal for the contractor as well, because sometimes they are getting contractor abroad or somewhere not in the same
Yeah.
region or something, so he cannot really visit the office, so he still can access the workload, he still can work in his design requirement and deliver all the requirement within a specific time, and it's still cost saving because we used
Mhm.
to deallocate and have all the high powered workstation fully shut it down after the requirement is complete. Okay, another use case, which is that's really one of the area that I build. I would say our product based on that. So we are getting many customers that is still using client to server application or legacy application that cannot be converted to a web. It cannot be modernized. It still cannot be accessible over HTML, or it cannot be accessible over internet. With this legacy application requirement, it was a very
Mhm.
open door for us to introduce Azure Virtual Desktop as a wrapper or bundle. So this
Okay.
application, we deliver it directly behind the scenes. It's a virtual desktop, but we deliver it as a SaaS solution for the end user. So the customer was able to get his solution, like the one
Yeah.
that I'm presenting on the right screen,
Yeah.
accessible for their customer without having to install it on their end user devices, without having also to have it for every single customer of them. So my customer, he has his own customers, which is he's selling
Mhm.
as a SaaS services, which is one of them was Stage. So Stage is a very legacy application for financial sector and accounting, where they maintain their purchases and inventory services and those payroll services.
Okay.
With that wrapping concept for the legacy application, the customer was able to deliver Sage as a SaaS service, which is every single user has his own credential, his own application behind the scenes, and also his own database, and he's connected to a separate application without having to install Sage on his environment, without having to have all the complex configurations on his local environment, and just able to access it from anywhere as well.
Great. Like, I mean, this is like basically if somebody has, they don't even need to deal with like licensing too in some ways, because let's say the software licensing. I mean, like, I mean, you know, you have to enter, if you use Photoshop, you have to enter like a license and all that stuff. There's software that require licensing, but you could actually bundle it in a way that you could sell it to your customers and saying that you're going to be using the AVD for it, and you know who the customers are, and you give them the right access rights to the application in some ways. So you eliminate one of the problem of signing your application and deploying it on people's computer where it might not install and all that stuff. So it's off the it's a huge problem with the legacy applications that don't run anymore.
Exactly. It's really solving a lot of our customer challenges. And as I told you, some of them start selling it as a SaaS. It's not a
Mhm.
SaaS, but it's
Yeah,
behind the scenes. It's a remote application. So you don't have to really install, you don't have to purchase, you don't have to go with the hassle for configuring, and also you don't have to deal with the vendor. Maybe
yeah,
you need Sage themselves to install the service for you, which is their hour is very costly. So all this challenges, it's been very flexible for you, and now you have the service in your hand. That's
yeah.
one of the key. Going forward with the disaster recovery and business continuity, some of the customers, I would say that they do have their workload running on production, but still
Mhm.
you have a need to validate that this, in case of this workload is interrupted in the production, I do have a separate environment where I have my end-to-end solution is running, but I need to validate it and I need to be able to access it without interrupting my existing function environment. So for
Okay.
that, what we usually propose, we propose having Azure Virtual Desktop within the disaster recovery environment. So we are building a full disaster recovery environment for them, which is will have their own application and will be based on their requirement, RTO and RPO, and we will configure all the dependent requirements, and then they will have their Azure Virtual Desktop in that environment. So the end user on the production, they still access everything from their local device, from their on-premises network, from their office network without having any problem. In case of they do have a disaster, now
Mhm.
it's time to jump into your Azure Virtual Desktop. From your Azure Virtual Desktop, you will have the disaster environment in a disaster recovery environment ready for you, and you can continue your work from there. So it's just saving the hassle of having firewall in between, routing the traffic from on-premises to the new environment, having a lot of networking, routing, and configurations and things. It's totally isolated network. They
Mhm.
consume the AD for the DR, they consume the normal network for the production environment or the main.
Cool. There was two things that you mentioned. Like I just wanted to mention it. RPO stands for Recovery Point Objective, and then there's RTO, which is Recovery Time Objective. Like, what's the time that you? How long does it take to actually recover up to that point, sort of thing. So just wanted
Exactly.
our audience to know about those.
Good,
We take it
good.
for granted that we know it, right?
Yeah, sometimes as IT, you know, there is also premium zone redundant storage at the end, and there is
It's true.
DCPR. So for sure, there is a lot of shortcuts, which is I'm pretty sure that your audience will be able to catch it up because at the end, it's I know that your audience are purely from the technical background as well. Moving forward, so on the next use case, which is even it happened to our
Hmm.
company itself, which is merger and acquisition. So
Yeah.
in case of a company got acquired or merged with another company, sometimes it will be very challenging to merge the both data center at the same time.
Hmm.
Their IT has their own practice, your IT have your own practice. There is a lot of configuration behind the scenes in order to have this merger happen. So it's
Yeah.
really challenging for the IT environment to have this smoothly happen. So here, where we can introduce again Azure Virtual Desktop with a different use case, where we can consider having the Azure Virtual Desktop hosted on one of the two environments. So one company is acquired by the second company. The IT resources on the second company will have Azure Virtual Desktop created and ready-made for the company one. So whenever a
Okay.
user from company one would like to access any services in company two, until they fully merge,
Yeah.
they can access the Azure Virtual Desktop in order to access the data within company two without complicating the networking and I would say facilitating the data center migration or
Okay.
merger until they reach to the destination that they do have two data center merged together. But until they
Yeah.
reach to this, because it's really it takes years for you in order to merge the two data center together, Azure Virtual Desktop can be a solution to company one or company two to allow the IT resources here or there, or even the end user as well, to access one of the two environment before the full merger happens.
Yeah, this is a very good point. Like, I mean, I see you don't realize that there's actually a lot of mergers that actually happen. Company A buys company B. You hear it on like Facebook buying Instagram, whatever it is. I mean, there's still certain information that you need from each company, and AVD actually does provide a solution for them to make it so that it's secure. So I love that
Yeah,
use case. Yeah,
yeah. To be honest,
yeah,
I do remember back in 2016, I was working in oil and gas company where
yeah,
it got acquired by another oil and gas company, global
yeah,
company. So at that time, the estimation for merger and applying all the security practices and multi-factor
mm,
authentication X and Y and Z and that time of things, it was planned for 3 years. So we started in 2016. I left the
yeah.
company, still the merger was not completed.
It happens. It happens. I know. Even IT projects take a long time too to actually make those migrations, data centers, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
really a big job. Okay, so going forward with the next one, which is flexibility and temporary work. We highlighted that in the beginning, but here I'm introducing a new component, which is
Mhm.
temporary workforce. So usually there is a company that would require a freelancer or
Yeah.
consultant or
Mhm.
vendor or application owner that will work with the company only for certain time, which it can be 5 days, it can be 10
Yeah.
days, it can be 1 month. So that kind of requirement, instead of, let's say, assume that he's in the other side of the world, in order to
Yeah.
get him in your environment or in order to provide him with VPN or X and Y and Z, there is a lot of configuration behind the scenes is
Mm.
required. If you have your Azure Virtual Desktop, it's all about username and password, which is I will introduce you to the Azure Virtual Desktop. I will provide you with the end user guide or the user onboarding. You have
Yeah.
your username and password, and bring your own device. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's where the flexibility comes in the picture.
Yeah. No, that's an important one too. Like if you need a graphic designer to design you something, but they need to access certain resources that you have, templates or whatever it is, you could say, okay, log into my thing and then design this. I don't know, PowerPoint. Although we have AI now designing things, but still, human is human. So no,
Yes.
it's an important point. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So going forward with the next one. Actually, we speak about the legacy application and
Mhm.
software packaging, but here I'm introducing very special application that I've been working with all of them. So I've been working with Sales, with QuickBooks, with Relate, Count Age, all those applications, and I know them very well. I've been
Mhm.
working with the software company for those solutions in order to wrap their software solution in a bundle or in a software package where we can consume Azure Virtual Desktop behind the scenes in order to deliver this application as a remote app or even as a full desktop solution as well. Some of those applications, by the way, yeah, the application itself, it does work as a remote app, but still it does require additional supported applications. Like let's say
Mhm.
Sage require Excel and require Outlook 32. So, and 32 is very important, by the way, because the end user does have a 64-bit, but the application does require 32-bit. So at
Yeah.
that time, where again we are introducing Azure Virtual Desktop to give the flexibility of having your system or your laptop 64, but you're still accessing the 32 application remotely without downgrading your system or limiting your system with 32-bit.
Cool. I actually used to know some ex colleagues of mine who used to work for Caseware too. But
Oh,
here's another question I wanted to ask you. Is like, what about costs? Like, I mean, we talk about these use cases. How does a organization estimate the cost of like these virtual desktop?
that's really, really important questions, which is for sure, whenever you are introducing a new technology, people will ask about the cost for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
here I'm going to cover the cost. Before I go to the actual cost itself, also I need to introduce that Azure Virtual Desktop in many use cases is introducing the cost saving. So as we highlighted in the beginning, you have to have your full environment in place. You have to have, let's say, running a full GPU systems in place, or maybe you have also devices to be, as we highlighted for the India people, we have to ship the devices to India from Italy. Those kind of cost considerations, AVD really introduce the cost saving, where it
Mhm.
offer you with auto scaling, where you can shut down the services behind the after you consuming them, and also there is no additional upfront cost. So it's pay as you go, which is consume what you use, or sorry, pay what you use. So
Yeah.
this is where the cost saving comes in the picture. Now to answer your questions, I have a special slide here where
Okay.
I will cover end-to-end Azure Virtual Desktop costing. So when it comes to the customer requirement, I have here a customer example where this
Okay.
customer is consist around of 500 user,
Mhm.
and that 500 user, the peak activity for them will be around 90%, which is
Mhm.
maybe 400, 450 of those
Yeah.
500 will be actively consuming the services day to day. And also, as part of the requirement, we do have 10 gigabyte for every single user. So this is one of
Okay.
the cost consideration that we have to consider.
Mhm.
And another very important aspect, which is I know that many of the people are really missing that area, is the outgoing traffic from the Azure Virtual Desktop. So I'm assuming that this end user will be interacting with the internet on day-to-day basis, and
Mhm.
his consumption on a monthly basis will be around 10 gig.
So here's a question sort of thing. It might actually. So is this consumption of me connecting to the virtual desktop, or is it connected to the virtual desktop? I'm going out to the internet.
Yes, connected to the virtual desktop, and then you are going to the internet. So you are with an Azure Virtual Desktop, and now you
Mhm.
are accessing, let's say, Office 365 application within Virtual Desktop. At that
Okay.
time, there is egress traffic. The ingress
Okay.
traffic is not built. So if you are
Okay.
downloading hundreds of gigs, you are not paying for. But
Okay.
if you're uploading or you are browsing, because for sure the browsing and those kind of things, it's ups and down. So for sure there is egress traffic is happening, and that's why we estimate around the user will be consuming around 10 gig on a monthly basis on the network.
Okay. So it's like don't go to your virtual desktop and use YouTube to get
That's very
watch videos.
important. Yes. I've been seeing that scenarios where the people are just because the internet is very good over there, they are just doing all the activities. Some of the services, which is download, I would recommend go and download. No problem
Yeah.
with that. But on the vice versa, which is upload, yeah, just think behind the scenes that there is egress traffic, and that egress traffic is cost considerations.
Cool.
Okay, so back to the point. Now we are estimating that those type of user are medium, meaning that they
Mm.
are not heavy or they are not superpower users. They are just users that they're gonna consume Office 365 and web application. So here it's not really heavy requirement behind the scenes, and I don't need a GPU requirement or dedicated workload and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Another consideration is the region itself. So for sure, when it comes to Azure, every region has his own cost. So when
Mhm.
I'm considering UAE Central here based in UAE, that's a different cost. If I'm considering US, usually STUS is the cheapest region for the compute. So it depends on which region you're gonna select, and also depend on the reservation. If you really plan to have a reservation or commitment with Microsoft, here the cost will goes down around 70% discount. So you have to consider that as well. We are not usually proposing reservation from day one, but that's something that we consider.
Yeah. And speaking of regions, you mentioned UAE sort of thing. You really have to consider the latency of your consumers too. If most of the company is going to be in UAE, it makes sense to pick the UAE. If you pick like I don't know US, there's going to be latency between like connecting all the way over there, sort of.
Exactly. That's very important. So if you have multiple users, you have to have multiple instances as well, which is hostful in that region, hostful in that region, and hostful in that region. And that's where you introduce a less latency for your end user. And that's one of the key area where Azure Virtual Desktop, because again, it's closest to you in your region. Here, I'm
Yeah.
introducing, let's say, UAE Central and UAE North, where the user accessing their VM and the latency is 3 milliseconds, 5 milliseconds,
Yeah.
which is for sure, it's like they are already in their network.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm considering here the size is D8, and also every single instance will have 4 users. So every
Mm.
VM will have, every single CPU will have 4 users, meaning this
Okay.
8 by 4.
Mm.
Okay. And then I'm considering another consideration that for single sessions, because some application would require single session, not multi-session. I will
Mm.
explain the multi and single in the next slide. But here, for the single session, I'm considering this size, and then the storage behind the scenes is Azure Net App. There is
Mm.
Microsoft introducing Azure Files as a file share, as well as Azure Net App. In that
Yeah.
situation, we are introducing Azure Net App because of the latency, because of the IOPS, because
Mm.
NetApp is behind the scenes built onto Ultra Disk. So the
Mm.
disks of the NetApp is Ultra. That's why you're getting better performance. Okay. When it comes to the cost consideration, once we estimate all those costs, you will see that if you are going with multi-session, the user
Yeah.
cost will be around $8 a month, which is very cheap. If you
Yes.
are considering the user is single session, meaning he gonna consume the full VM himself, it's
Yeah.
gonna be $50. And if it's a personal, there is difference also between personal, single, multi. If it's personal, it's 55.
Mm.
Okay, so let me quickly highlight what is the difference between personal and single and multi. So multi
Sure.
meaning that the whole team, or maybe we highlighted like 500. The 500 can consume around 50 VM. So
Yeah.
every VM will host number of users, which is multi-session, and behind the scenes they are all consuming the same CPU and RAM, and they are sharing the resources together. That's why the cost is very cheap. And when it comes to the single pool, I don't have a requirement to have assigned the virtual machine to this engineer, but the
Mm.
application itself, it does require to be dedicated on one single session. It cannot be segregated across multiple sessions, the
Mm.
application. So that's where I introduce a single session, so the user can randomly jump in between the VMs. It's not assigned for him, but still the application itself is required single session.
Okay.
Now it goes to the next level. Let's say I have C-level in my environment, or very special users that does require a personal machine that is assigned to him, where we introduce a single session. And now Microsoft introduced a new technology, which is Windows Virtual Desktop, that Windows 365, that again, it are giving you this layer, which is single personal session.
So I've got a question over here. Like if you look at those three prices, sort of thing, those three
Yeah,
of
yeah,
them.
please.
If it's a development work, like a shop, basically developers are there. Do you see them using more the first one, the second one, or the third one?
I would say that most of the use cases are applicable for the first one, which is the
Okay.
multi-session. Most of the use cases. So for sure, I will introduce that option for them. We can increase the VM compute. We can decrease of the
Yeah.
number of the user. The cost will be a bit changed, but we will deliver at the end the best performance for the end user to satisfy their need. So that should be the best option, unless
Okay.
their application doesn't support the multi-session. I have a
Okay.
situation which is, it was only 1 or 2 use cases in my life that the application is very legacy, and it doesn't support multi-threading, and it doesn't support multi-session.
Okay. Great.
Okay. So I would say that's a full breakdown of the code. I will not really go in depth on that, but this is explaining the previous three options,
Mhm.
which is the $7 and the 50 and $55, and
Yeah.
that's explaining the breakdown why the cost it goes high. So if you're checking on the first one, which is the multi-session, you will see that overall we would require around to 32 VM.
Mhm.
Okay. And that 32 PM, it's on the peak hours, and for sure it will be allocated on the non-peak hours.
Okay.
But when it comes to the single session, you will see that on the peak hour, I'm assuming that 400 50 user will be consuming the service. So at still, I need 450 VM as well. That's why the cost is very high. A second key point of the cost is the disk. So here you will see that, however, I'm providing premium disk on the multi-station, but the cost is less because the number of disk is only 32.
Yeah.
But on the user group 2, which is single session, I'm introducing 450 disk again, which is the cost for the 450 disk will be, even they are standard, the cost will be around $5,600.
Okay.
So that's where the cost comes into the single and multi,
Yeah.
and for sure for the storage, again, the file share will be the same.
No, it's a great, like showing all the breakdown. Like even you chose not the premium for like more machines, it would lower the cost because by per OS cost per VM sort of thing lowers down. It's almost like more than half the lower the cost kind of thing. So yeah, no, it's great.
Great. So I'm reaching out to the final screen, which is the prerequisite in order to have your Azure Virtual Desktop in place. I would say you just have to choose your identity approach, which is we explained it in the beginning of the
Yeah.
security part. And also you have to consider if you're gonna have a domain controller on premises or in the cloud, and also you have to consider the VPN for that. And then you will select your storage for your end user, where it can be Azure Files or Azure Net Apps. And then you just end up by validating your access requirement, global admin, and the directory administrator, as well as the tenant admin. It's not really admin, but I would say those are the basis in order to have your end-to-end solution.
Great. Thank you so much. Like I learned quite a lot of these use cases. It's so helpful. Last question I want to ask you, call to action for our people who are watching this. Like I know you have Udemy, you're teaching some courses, you love to share knowledge and all that stuff. Well, should they like I'll post some of the links to follow you on like on LinkedIn and like Twitter. Do you, or X, they call it now X. So all that information I'll put it. Anything that you want to call out by any chance?
I would say that, as you highlighted, Udemy is my call-out area where I introduce Azure Virtual Desktop courses. I do have two courses in my Udemy system, which is one of them is the Azure Virtual Desktop end-to-end solution, where you can deploy or create your end-to-end solution without really laying over on someone else. And the second course is securing your Azure Virtual Desktop. To be honest, I introduced the first one, and I got to know that many of the people are having their Azure Virtual Desktop, but it's not secure enough. That's why I introduced the second course.
Great, great. So I'll put those in the show notes and stuff. Thank you so much, Atallah. I really appreciate it. This was very fruitful for us. And hopefully we'll have you sometime later too.
Really, really thanks for having me. And it was really interesting topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Have a good day. Bye.